Entire family enabled my brother's stalking behavior for years until he broke into my girlfriend's school at night. I exposed everything in court and now they're all facing jail time. My 30M younger brother Louis, 27M, has been ruining my life for years and my parents refuse to see it. Now he's targeting my girlfriend Andrea, 26F, and I don't know what to do anymore. We live in a small town in Ohio where everyone knows everyone. My parents run a successful accounting firm and care a lot about their reputation. They had me first, then Louis 3 years later. From day one, Louis could do no wrong in their eyes. When Louis was 7 and I was 10, I saved up my allowance for months to buy a remote control helicopter. Louis wanted to play with it, but I said no because he had already broken 2 of my toys that week. While I was at school the next day, he took it outside and flew it straight into our neighbor's fence, breaking it completely. When I got home and found the pieces, Louis told our parents I had been flying it recklessly and it was an accident. My parents made me apologize to Louis for not sharing and bought him his own helicopter the next weekend. When I was 15, I had been dating my first girlfriend, Phoebe, for about 6 months. Louis, who was 12 at the time, started telling people at school that I had cheated on her with multiple girls. He made up detailed stories about seeing me with other girls behind the movie theater and at parties I had never even attended. Phoebe broke up with me without even asking for my side of the story. When I confronted Louis, he just shrugged and said, maybe I shouldn't be so boring if I wanted to keep a girlfriend. My parents said boys will be boys and that I was overreacting. The pattern continued through high school and college. Every serious relationship I had, Louis would find a way to destroy. He told my girlfriend Amy that I had a gambling problem and showed her fake bank statements. He convinced my girlfriend Rachel that I was planning to break up with her anyway, so she should save herself the embarrassment. Each time, my parents either didn't believe me or said Louis was just looking out for me. After college, I moved back home to help with the family business while saving money. Louis also lived at home and worked part-time at a sporting goods store. He had never held a job for more than a few months. My parents paid for his car, his phone, his clothes, everything. They said he was still finding himself. 2 years ago, I met Andrea at a coffee shop downtown. She was visiting from the next town over for a job interview at the local elementary school. She's a second-grade teacher and the kindest person I've ever met. We started dating and for the first time in my life, I kept a relationship completely secret from my family. For 8 months, I told them nothing about Andrea. We would meet in the next town over or drive to the city for dates. I had learned my lesson about introducing women to my family. But Andrea started asking questions about why she had never met my parents or been to my house. She thought I was embarrassed of her or that maybe I was married. I had to make a choice. I decided to tell my parents about Andrea first without Louis around. I went to their house on a Thursday evening when Louis was supposedly at work. I explained that I had been seeing someone for 8 months and wanted to bring her for dinner on Sunday. My mother immediately started planning the menu and asking questions about Andrea's job and family. My father nodded approvingly when I mentioned she was a teacher. Everything seemed normal. Sunday came and I picked up Andrea from her apartment. She had bought a new dress and spent an hour doing her hair. She was excited to finally meet my family. I had told her some stories about Louis, but made them sound like typical sibling rivalry. I didn't want to scare her away. We arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 o'clock. My mother answered the door with a huge smile and hugged Andrea warmly. My father shook her hand and complimented her dress. Louis appeared from the kitchen and immediately pushed past our mother to get to Andrea. He wrapped her in a hug that lasted at least 10 seconds longer than appropriate. Andrea's smile faltered slightly, but she politely hugged him back. During dinner, Louis dominated the conversation. He sat directly across from Andrea and kept leaning forward to touch her arm while talking. He told story after story about my childhood, but twisted each one to make me look bad. He described the time I got sick at a school carnival as me being too weak to handle normal activities. He turned the story of me getting lost at a mall into evidence that I had always been irresponsible and needed constant supervision. My parents laughed at every story and added their own comments about how Lewis had always been the more reliable brother. Andrea kept glancing at me with confusion. She had heard completely different versions of these same stories from me. The worst moment came when my mother served dessert. Louis insisted on cutting Andrea's slice of cake for her and tried to feed her the first bite from his own fork. Andrea politely declined and said she could manage, but Louis persisted. He actually grabbed her chin with his free hand and tried to guide the fork to her mouth. Andrea jerked away and said, "Stop, please." Louis laughed and said he was just being friendly. After dinner, Andrea excused herself to use the bathroom. I followed her to the hallway and found Louis standing outside the bathroom door. When Andrea came out, he immediately stepped closer to her, effectively trapping her between himself and the wall. Louis was telling her that she seemed too smart and ambitious for someone like me. He said I had always been the type to hold people back and that she should consider dating someone with more drive, someone like him. Andrea tried to step around him, but he moved to block her path. She said, "Excuse me," twice, but he kept talking. I stepped between them and told Louis to back off. He raised his hands and mocked surrender and said he was just getting to know my girlfriend. My parents appeared from the kitchen and asked what was happening. Louis said I was being paranoid and possessive. My father told me to relax and stop being so territorial. We left shortly after that. Andrea was quiet during the drive back to her apartment. She finally said that dinner had been uncomfortable and that Louis had made her feel uneasy. She asked if he always acted that way around women. I told her the truth about his history of sabotaging my relationships. Andrea listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she said she understood why I had waited so long to introduce her. She also said she wasn't going to let Lou or anyone else ruin what we had together. We agreed that we would limit contact with my family and see them only when necessary. For 2 weeks, everything seemed fine. Then Andrea started getting phone calls at work. The caller would hang up as soon as she answered. Her principal mentioned that someone had been calling the school asking questions about her personal life and work schedule. A parent complained that a man had been sitting in the parking lot during pickup time, just watching the building. Andrea started staying late at school to avoid walking to her car alone. One evening, she called me in tears because someone had followed her home and sat outside her apartment building for 20 minutes before driving away. She had taken down the license plate number. When I ran it through a friend who works at the DMV, it came back registered to one of Louis's friends from high school. I drove straight to my parents' house and found Louis in the garage working on his car. I confronted him about the harassment. He denied everything at first, then smirked and said maybe Andrea was just paranoid. He said some women couldn't handle attention from real men. I grabbed him by the shirt and told him to stay away from Andrea. He shoved me back and said Andrea was fair game since I obviously couldn't take care of her properly. That's when I hit him. I punched him square in the jaw and he fell backward into his toolbox. My parents came running from the house. Luzzie was holding his face and yelling that I had attacked him for no reason. I tried to explain about the stalking and harassment, but they wouldn't listen. My mother said I had clearly lost my mind and needed anger management. My father told me to get out of his house and not come back until I apologized to Luzzie. I left and haven't spoken to any of them since. That was 6 months ago. Andrea and I moved in together and tried to move on with our lives, but the harassment didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Update 1. I thought things couldn't get worse after my last post, but I was wrong. The harassment escalated beyond anything I could have imagined, and my family's response has been even more twisted than I expected. After I went no contact with my parents and Luzzie, the phone calls to Andrea's work increased. Her principal was getting daily calls from someone claiming to be her ex-boyfriend, saying she had mental health issues and shouldn't be around children. The caller knew specific details about her lesson plans and which grades she taught. Someone was clearly watching her very closely. Andrea's car was vandalized twice in the school parking lot. First, someone poured paint thinner on her windshield, cracking it completely. The second time, all 4 tires were slashed. The school installed additional security cameras, but whoever was doing this knew exactly where the blind spots were. The breaking point came 6 weeks ago. Andrea was working late, grading papers in her classroom around 8 p.m. The custodian had already left, and she thought she was alone in the building. She heard footsteps in the hallway and assumed it was the night security guard making his rounds. When she looked up from her desk, Louis was standing in her classroom doorway. He had somehow gotten past the locked main entrance and walked through the entire school to find her room. Andrea immediately grabbed her phone and threatened to call the police. Louis stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. He said they needed to talk without my interference. He told Andrea that I had been lying about him and that he had never meant to make her uncomfortable. He said he understood why she might have gotten the wrong impression, but he was actually trying to protect her from my controlling behavior. Andrea stood up and told him to leave immediately. Louis moved closer to her desk and said he wasn't finished talking. He said I had a history of psychological manipulation and that my previous girlfriends had all left me for the same reason. He claimed I was isolating Andrea from her friends and family and that soon she would have no one left but me. Andrea tried to walk around her desk toward the door, but Louis grabbed her wrist. He said she needed to listen because he was the only one brave enough to tell her the truth. Andrea yanked her arm away and ran for the door. Louis followed her into the hallway, calling after her that she would regret not listening to him. Andrea made it to the main office and triggered the silent alarm. The police arrived within minutes and found Louis still in the building looking through windows of other classrooms. He told the officers he was there to pick up his nephew and had gotten lost looking for the main office. When they asked for his nephew's name and teacher, he couldn't provide either. The officers arrested Louis for trespassing and took Andrea's statement. She showed them photos of her vandalized car and played recordings of some of the threatening voicemails she had been receiving. The detective assigned to the case said they had enough evidence to charge Louis with stalking and harassment in addition to the trespassing. Here's where it gets really twisted. My parents hired a lawyer for Louis before he even had his arraignment. The lawyer contacted Andrea's principal and claimed that Andrea had been having an affair with Louis and that her accusations were revenge for him ending the relationship. The lawyer provided fake text messages that appeared to be from Andrea, begging Louis to leave his girlfriend and be with her. Andrea's principal called her into the office and asked about the allegations. Andrea showed him the police reports and explained the entire situation. The principal believed her but said the school board was concerned about the negative publicity. They suggested Andrea take a leave of absence until the criminal case was resolved. Andrea refused to leave her job because of false accusations. She hired her own lawyer who immediately identified the fake text messages as fabricated evidence. The metadata showed they had been created on a computer, not sent from an actual phone. Andrea's lawyer filed complaints with the state bar against Louis' attorney for presenting fraudulent evidence. The most disgusting part came last week. My mother called Andrea directly and tried to convince her to drop the charges. She said Louis was just a confused young man who had developed feelings for her and didn't know how to express them appropriately. She offered to pay for Andrea's car repairs and promised that Louis would stay away from her if she would just give him another chance. When Andrea refused, my mother's tone completely changed. She said Andrea was destroying their family over a misunderstanding and that no jury would believe her word against Louis. She said Louis had friends who would testify that Andrea had been flirting with him at family dinner and leading him on. She warned Andrea that small towns have long memories and that she might find it difficult to continue working here if she pursued the charges. Andrea recorded the entire conversation and gave it to the prosecutor. Witness intimidation is a felony in our state. So now my mother is also facing criminal charges. Louis' trial is scheduled for next month. His lawyer is trying to get a plea deal, but the prosecutor says the evidence is too strong and the behavior too serious for anything less than jail time. The school board voted unanimously to support Andrea and provide her with additional security measures. Andrea and I have been looking at jobs in other states. We both realize that staying here means dealing with my family's harassment for years to come. Louis might go to jail, but my parents have made it clear they will never stop blaming Andrea for their son's actions. I keep thinking about all the warning signs I ignored over the years. Every relationship Louis destroyed. Every lie my parents believed, every time they chose his version of events over obvious evidence. I thought they were just enabling bad behavior. But now I see they were actively participating in it. Update 2. Louis' trial ended last week and the aftermath has been more dramatic than I expected. The verdict was guilty on all charges. But what happened during the trial revealed just how deep my family's dysfunction really goes. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against Louis. Security footage from the school showing him entering through a side door he had propped open earlier in the day. Phone records proving he had made over 60 calls to Andrea's workplace. Text messages between Louis and his friends coordinating the harassment campaign. The fake evidence his lawyer had submitted was also presented as an example of ongoing witness intimidation. Andrea testified for 3 hours about the stalking and harassment. She remained calm and factual throughout her testimony, even when Louis's lawyer tried to imply she had somehow encouraged his behavior. The judge stopped the cross-examination twice when the questions became inappropriate. Louis took the stand in his own defense, which his lawyer had advised against. He immediately started ranting about how I had stolen Andrea from him and how she had been sending him mixed signals. He claimed Andrea had smiled at him during the family dinner, which he interpreted as romantic interest. He said following her and calling her workplace were just his way of trying to get to know her better. The prosecutor asked Louis to explain how breaking into an elementary school at night was part of getting to know someone. Louis said he thought Andrea would be impressed by his persistence and would finally agree to talk to him without my interference. When asked why he had vandalized her car, Louis said he was trying to give her a reason to call him for help. The most damaging moment came when the prosecutor played the recording of my mother threatening Andrea. Louis interrupted the playback and yelled that his mother was right and that Andrea was destroying their family. He said Andrea should have been grateful for his attention because most women would be lucky to have someone fight for them the way he had fought for her. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Louis was found guilty of stalking, harassment, criminal trespass, and vandalism. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. He was also ordered to have no contact with Andrea or me for 5 years. Louis' reaction to the verdict was explosive. He started screaming at Andrea that she would regret destroying his life. He threatened to make sure everyone in town knew what kind of person she really was. The bailiffs had to physically restrain him while he was dragged from the courtroom. My parents sat in the front row during the entire trial, glaring at Andrea and whispering to each other. After the verdict, my father stood up and shouted that this was a travesty of justice. He said Louis was the real victim and that Andrea had manipulated the entire situation to make herself look innocent. My mother's trial for witness intimidation was scheduled for the following week. She ended up taking a plea deal that included 6 months of house arrest and community service. Her lawyer negotiated to keep her out of jail because she had no prior criminal record, but she now has a permanent criminal conviction on her record. The local newspaper covered both trials extensively. My parents' accounting firm has lost several major clients who don't want to be associated with a family involved in stalking and witness intimidation. My father had to sell his partnership in the firm and take a job with a larger company in the next county. The most shocking revelation came after Louis' sentencing. His cellmate from his brief pre-trial detention reached out to the prosecutor with additional information. Louis had apparently bragged about sabotaging my previous relationships and had detailed plans for escalating his harassment of Andrea if he was released. Louis had told his cellmate that he planned to follow Andrea to whatever new job she found and repeat the same pattern of harassment. He said he knew he could eventually wear her down and convince her that I was the problem. He also said he had friends willing to help him continue the campaign even if he went to jail. This information was used to justify the maximum sentence and the extended no-contact order. The prosecutor said Louis' own words proved he had no intention of stopping his behavior and represented a continued threat to both Andrea and me. Andrea and I received job offers in Colorado the day after Louis' sentencing. We accepted immediately and gave notice at our current jobs. Andrea's principal and the school board wrote letters of recommendation praising her professionalism throughout the entire ordeal. Several teachers and parents also wrote letters supporting her character and dedication. We've started packing and will be gone before Louis is released from jail. Andrea says she's not running away from the problem, but rather running toward a new life where Louis' actions can't define her anymore. I agree with her completely. My extended family has been split by the trials. Some relatives believe Louis got what he deserved and have apologized for my parents' behavior. Others think Andrea overreacted and that we should have handled things privately within the family. I've decided not to maintain relationships with anyone who thinks stalking and harassment are acceptable family behaviors. Update 3. We've been living in Colorado for 4 months now and life has been completely different from what we left behind in Ohio. Andrea found a position at an excellent elementary school and I'm working for a marketing firm in Denver. For the first time in years, we wake up without worrying about harassment or family drama. Louis was released from jail 2 weeks ago after serving his full sentence. His probation officer contacted us to confirm our address and remind us about the no-contact order. Within 3 days of his release, he violated that order. Louis somehow obtained our new phone number and called Andrea's school, claiming to be her brother and saying there was a family emergency. The school secretary was suspicious because Andrea had specifically warned them about potential harassment from Ohio. They called Andrea to verify and she immediately contacted the local police and Louis' probation officer. Because Louis crossed state lines to violate the no-contact order, federal charges were filed. He was arrested again within a week and is now facing additional jail time. His probation was revoked and he's looking at another 18 months in prison. My parents apparently drove to Colorado to try to find us after Louis' arrest. They went to Andrea's school and demanded to speak with her, claiming they wanted to apologize and work things out. The school principal called the police who escorted my parents off the property and warned them about trespassing. That evening, my parents showed up at our apartment building. They somehow got past the security door and were knocking on our door when we came home from work. My father immediately started yelling about how we had destroyed their family and ruined Louis's life. My mother was crying and begging Andrea to drop the new charges against Lizzie. I told them to leave immediately or I would call the police. My father said they had driven 12 hours to talk to us and deserved to be heard. Andrea calmly pulled out her phone and started dialing. My mother grabbed Andrea's arm and said she just needed 5 minutes to explain everything. That was their second mistake. Putting hands on Andrea after everything that had happened was unforgivable. I stepped between them and told my parents they had exactly 30 seconds to get out of our building before the police arrived. My father started threatening to sue us for destroying his business and his family's reputation. He said he would make sure everyone in our new community knew what kind of people we really were. My mother said they had spent their life savings on lawyers and legal fees because of us. The police arrived and arrested both of my parents for harassment and trespassing because they had traveled across state lines to harass us. Federal prosecutors are considering additional charges. The local district attorney said, "My parents' behavior showed a pattern of escalation that warranted serious consequences." Andrea and I testified via video link for Louis' federal sentencing hearing last month. The judge sentenced him to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. He will not be eligible for early release, and any future violations will result in even longer sentences. My parents were released on bail, but are prohibited from leaving Ohio while their case is pending. Their lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal. But the prosecutor wants jail time because of their history of witness intimidation and their escalation to physical contact with Andrea. The most satisfying part of this whole ordeal has been watching my parents face consequences for their actions. For 30 years, they enabled Louis' behavior and made excuses for his increasingly serious misconduct. They never believed his victims and always found ways to blame everyone else for his actions. Now they're facing criminal charges, financial ruin, and the loss of their community standing. Their business is gone. Their reputation is destroyed and their golden child is in federal prison. The reality they created through decades of denial and enabling has finally collapsed on them. Andrea and I got married last month in a small ceremony with just a few close friends. We didn't invite any family members and didn't announce it publicly. We wanted our wedding to be about our future together, not about the toxic relationships we left behind. Several people have asked if I ever feel guilty about what happened to my parents and Louis. The answer is no. Every choice they made, every lie they told, every victim they blamed led directly to this outcome. They had countless opportunities to address Louis' behavior and chose not to. They created this situation through years of willful blindness and enabling. Andrea is pregnant with our first child due in the spring. We've decided to raise our children with no contact with my parents or Louis. Our kids will grow up knowing they're safe and protected, something I never experienced in my own childhood. We've built a life based on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. We don't tolerate harassment, manipulation, or abuse from anyone, including family members. Breaking the cycle of dysfunction was the best decision we ever made. People sometimes ask if I miss my family or regret cutting them off completely. I don't miss the constant drama, the gaslighting, or the fear of what Louis might do next. I don't regret protecting Andrea and our future children from people who refuse to acknowledge their own destructive behavior. My real family is Andrea and our unborn child. We're building something healthy and stable together. Far away from the toxicity that defined my first 30 years. That's enough family for me. Now, let's move to the next story. Story 2. I discovered my husband's secret first marriage after story 2. His family bullied me for being poor. Now, I'm divorcing him and starting a business with his sister. Hi, everyone. I'm Elena, 28F, and I need advice about a situation with my husband, Tom, 30M, and his family. We've been married for 3 years and together for 6. When we first met, everything seemed perfect. Tom was kind, attentive, and supportive. His family appeared nice, too, especially his sister, Becca, 32F. I grew up in a small town with working-class parents. My dad was a factory worker, and my mom cleaned houses. They worked hard, but always struggled to make ends meet. From a young age, I understood the value of money and hard work. I started babysitting at 12 and got my first official part-time job at 16, working at the local diner after school and on weekends. Despite the financial challenges, my parents always encouraged me to pursue my education. They couldn't afford to send me to a fancy college, but they supported my decision to attend community college while working full-time. It wasn't easy juggling work and studies, but I was determined to build a better life for myself. After graduating from community college, I got a job as a marketing assistant at a small local company. I worked my way up, taking on extra projects and learning everything I could about the industry. Now, 6 years later, I'm the marketing manager at a mid-sized firm in the city. I'm proud of what I've accomplished and the career I've built from scratch. Tom's background couldn't be more different from mine. He comes from a wealthy family that owns a successful chain of high-end restaurants. His parents, Karen, 58F, and Robert, 60M, started with one small restaurant and built it into an empire over the past 30 years. Tom grew up in a mansion, went to private schools, and never had to worry about money. When we met at a mutual friend's party, I was initially intimidated by Tom's background, but he was down to earth and genuinely interested in getting to know me. He said he admired my work ethic and how I'd built my career from nothing. We bonded over our shared love of cooking, though his experiences were from fancy culinary classes, while mine were from helping my mom in our tiny kitchen. For the first few years of our relationship, everything was great. Tom's family seemed to accept me, even if they sometimes made comments about my quaint upbringing. I brushed these off, thinking they were just trying to relate to me in their own way. After we got married, things started to change. The comments from Tom's family, especially his mother, Karen, became more frequent and pointed. They'd say things like, "It must be nice to marry into money," or "I'm sure Elena appreciates not having to clip coupons anymore." At first, I tried to laugh it off, but it started to wear on me. Karen began criticizing my clothes, saying they looked cheap or unprofessional. She'd make a big show of giving me expensive designer items for birthdays and Christmas, then get offended when I didn't wear them to family events. I tried explaining that fancy clothes weren't practical for my job, but she'd just roll her eyes and mutter something about career girls. Tom never stood up for me during these interactions. He'd say his mom was just trying to be nice and that I should be grateful for the gifts. He started pressuring me to quit my job, saying I didn't need to work anymore. But I love my career and I'm not comfortable relying on someone else for money. Plus, I worked hard to get where I am. I'm not ready to give that up. The situation got worse when Tom's sister Becca got engaged to a man from a similar wealthy background. Karen constantly compared me to Becca's fiancé, making comments about how he fit in so well with the family. She'd pointedly asked me when I was going to start dressing more appropriately for family gatherings, like Becca's fiancé did. I tried talking to Tom about how his family's behavior was affecting me, but he always dismissed my concerns. He'd say I was being too sensitive or that I needed to try harder to fit in. It felt like he was more concerned about keeping his family happy than supporting his wife. The situation came to a head last month. Tom's family was hosting a big charity gala for the restaurant chain's 30th anniversary. Karen insisted on buying me a dress for the event. It was a designer gown that cost more than I make in a month. I felt uncomfortable, but Tom said I had to wear it to make his mom happy and to look the part of a successful restaurator's wife. At the gala, I felt out of place. Everyone was talking about their recent vacations to exotic locations or the latest luxury cars they'd bought. I tried to join in conversations, but people would quickly lose interest when they realized I couldn't contribute to discussions about yacht clubs or private jets. I went to the restroom to take a breather and overheard Karen talking to her friends near the sinks. She was laughing about how she had to dress up the help to make me presentable. She said Tom could have done so much better than some girl from the trailer park and that she was embarrassed to introduce me as her daughter-in-law. She even said she was trying to convince Tom to have me sign a post-nuptial agreement to protect the family's assets. I was devastated. I'd spent years trying to fit in with Tom's family, thinking that if I just tried hard enough, they'd accept me. But hearing Karen's words made me realize that would never happen. They'd always see me as beneath them, no matter what I did. I left the bathroom and found Tom. I told him what I'd heard and said I wanted to leave. Instead of supporting me, he accused me of eavesdropping and said I must have misunderstood his mother. He insisted we stay at the gala to keep up appearances. I couldn't take it anymore. I told Tom I was leaving with or without him. He just looked embarrassed and told me not to make a scene. I took off the expensive jewelry Karen had lent me for the event, handed it to Tom, and left. I went to stay with my best friend, Jenny, 29F, who I've known since high school. She's been my rock through all of this, reminding me of who I am and where I come from. Tom didn't even try to stop me from leaving. He just looked annoyed that I was causing a disruption at his family's event. It's been a week and I'm still at Jenny's place. Tom has called and texted, but only to tell me to come home and apologize to his family. He says I'm being selfish and immature and that I need to learn to appreciate the life he's given me. He doesn't seem to understand or care about how hurt I am. I don't know what to do. I love Tom, or at least I thought I did, but I can't keep living like this. His family treats me like I'm beneath them, and he does nothing to stop it. In fact, he seems to agree with them most of the time. I feel like I'm losing myself trying to fit into their world. Part of me wonders if I should have seen this coming. There were small signs early in our relationship. Comments about my car being a starter vehicle or surprise that I'd never been to Europe, but I was so in love that I ignored them. Now I'm wondering if that was a mistake. I'm also worried about what divorce would mean. I signed a prenuptial agreement before we got married. At the time, I didn't think much of it because I never planned on divorcing Tom. Now I'm scared about what it might mean for my financial future if I leave. Am I overreacting to all of this? Should I just accept that this is how things are going to be if I want to stay married to Tom? Or is it time to consider ending my marriage and going back to the life I had before, even if it means struggling financially again? I could really use some outside perspective on this. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and advice really helped me think things through. A lot has happened in the past 2 weeks, and I wanted to give you all an update. After staying at Jenny's for a few days, I decided to go back home and talk to Tom. I thought maybe if we had a real honest conversation away from his family, we could work things out. I was wrong. When I got home, Tom acted like nothing had happened. He didn't apologize or even acknowledge the incident at the gala. Instead, he told me his parents were coming over for dinner that night, and I needed to apologize to them for my rude behavior at the event. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told Tom I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. That's when things got ugly. Tom started yelling, saying I was ungrateful and didn't appreciate everything his family had done for me. He brought up how they'd paid for our wedding, which I hadn't wanted to be so lavish in the first place, and how they'd helped us with the down payment on our house, which again, I had wanted to be smaller and more modest. Tom said I was lucky to be with him, and that plenty of women would be thrilled to take my place. He even implied that he'd had other options, but had settled for me. In that moment, I realized the Tom I fell in love with was gone. Maybe he never really existed. I told Tom I was leaving and that I wanted a divorce. He laughed and said I'd never survive without him and his family's money. He reminded me of the prenup I'd had signed and said I'd be left with nothing if I left him. Then he said something that really scared me. He threatened to use his family's connections to ruin my career if I tried to leave. I packed a bag and left, going back to Jenny's place. Tom has been calling and texting non-stop, alternating between begging me to come back and threatening me if I don't. I've been looking into my legal options, but I'm worried about going up against Tom's family and their expensive lawyers. Here's where things take an unexpected turn. 2 days ago, I got a call from Becca, Tom's sister. She asked to meet me for coffee. I was hesitant given how things had gone with Tom's family, but decided to hear her out. When we met, Becca dropped a bombshell. She told me she's been wanting to leave the family business for years, but was afraid of being cut off financially. She said she couldn't stand how her parents and Tom treated me, and that it wasn't the first time they'd done something like this. According to Becca, Tom had been married before, about 5 years before he met me. His ex-wife, Lydia, also came from a working-class background. Becca said the family treated Lydia the same way they treated me, constantly putting her down and trying to change her. Tom never stood up for her either. The marriage only lasted a year before Lydia left. Becca said the family paid Lydia a lot of money to keep quiet about how they treated her. They were worried about their reputation, especially since they were in the process of expanding their restaurant chain at the time. Becca showed me documents proving all of this, including the settlement agreement with Tom's ex-wife. I was shocked. Tom had never mentioned being married before. When I asked why she was telling me all this now, Becca said she couldn't stand by and watch it happen again. She also admitted she was planning to leave the family business and wanted my help. Becca wants to start her own company, something completely different from the family business. She has an idea for a meal kit delivery service that would focus on teaching people how to cook restaurant-quality meals at home. She has the culinary skills and business ideas, but she's worried about the backlash from her family. She asked if I would consider going into business with her, saying my marketing experience would be invaluable. I don't know what to think. On one hand, I'm angry that Becca didn't speak up sooner. On the other hand, I understand how hard it can be to stand up to family, especially when there's so much money involved. And I have to admit, the idea of starting a new business is exciting. It would be a chance to use my skills and experience in a new way and to build something of my own. I haven't given Becca an answer yet. I'm still processing everything she told me about Tom and his previous marriage. I can't believe he kept something so big from me. It makes me wonder what else he might have been hiding. I've decided to move forward with the divorce. I've contacted a lawyer and started the process. The lawyer thinks we might be able to challenge the prenup based on Tom's failure to disclose his previous marriage. Tom doesn't know about the information Becca gave me yet. Part of me wants to confront him, but my lawyer advised against it for now. I'm scared about what the future holds, but I also feel a sense of relief. I know I'm making the right decision by leaving Tom. I just don't know if I should trust Becca and consider her business proposal. What if it's some kind of trap set up by the family? On top of all this, my parents found out about what's been going on. They're furious with Tom and his family, and they want me to come back home. Part of me wants to take them up on the offer. It would be a chance to regroup and figure out my next steps. But another part of me feels like that would be moving backward. I've worked so hard to build my life and career in the city. I'm also worried about the potential fallout at work. I don't know if Tom will make good on his threats to try and ruin my career. Should I start looking for a new job just in case, or would that make me look guilty of something? There's so much to consider. And I feel overwhelmed. What do you think, Reddit? Should I take a chance on starting a business with Becca? Or is this all too complicated and I should just make a clean break from the whole family? Should I consider moving back to my hometown or stick it out in the city? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 2. Hello again, everyone. It's been about a month since my last update and a lot has changed. I want to thank you all again for your support and advice. It's really helped me navigate this difficult time. First, the divorce is moving forward. Tom didn't take it well when I served him with papers. He alternated between begging me to come back and threatening to ruin me financially. I'm glad I had Becca's information about his previous marriage as it gave my lawyer some leverage. We're in the process of challenging the prenup and my lawyer seems optimistic. Speaking of Becca, I decided to hear her out about the business proposal. We met several times to discuss her ideas and I have to say I was impressed. Her meal kit delivery service concept is solid, focusing on teaching people how to cook restaurant-quality meals at home. It's completely different from her family's business, and it's something I can see myself getting excited about. After a lot of consideration, I agreed to partner with Becca. We've been working on a business plan and looking for investors. It's exciting, but also scary. I know there's a risk in going into business with my soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law, but I think it's worth taking. Becca has been incredibly supportive throughout this whole process, and I feel like I can trust her. Now, here's where things get complicated. Last week, Karen, Tom's mother, found out about my partnership with Becca. She showed up at my apartment, furious. She accused me of trying to steal her daughter away from the family. Then she made a shocking offer. Karen said she'd give me $1 million if I walked away from the divorce and the business with Becca. She said she'd make sure Tom treated me better and that the family would accept me. All I had to do was convince Becca to come back to the family business and forget about our startup. I was stunned. I told Karen the first needed time to think about it. She gave me a week to decide. The money is tempting. I won't lie. It would solve a lot of my financial worries and make the divorce process easier. But I know it would mean giving up my self-respect and betraying Becca. I also can't help but wonder if this is some kind of test or trap. What if I agree and then they use it against me somehow? I wouldn't put it past them at this point. They've already shown how manipulative they can be. I haven't told Becca about Karen's offer yet. I'm afraid it might damage the trust we've been building, but I also feel guilty keeping it from her, especially since it involves her, too. On top of all this, I've been dealing with some fallout at work. I don't know if Tom followed through on his threats, but I've noticed some of my co-workers treating me differently. My boss called me in for a meeting last week and asked if everything was okay at home. He mentioned that he'd heard some concerns about my personal life affecting my work. I tried to assure him that I'm handling everything professionally, but I'm worried about my job security. I've been going back and forth on what to do. The logical part of me says to reject Karen's offer and continue with my plans, but there's a small voice in my head wondering if I'm making a mistake by turning down such a large sum of money. What if the business with Becca fails? What if I can't find another job? I know I need to make a decision soon. Karen's deadline is in 2 days. I'm leaning towards rejecting the offer, but I'm scared of the potential fallout. What if they try to sabotage my partnership with Becca? What if they make the divorce even more difficult? I've also been thinking about my parents' offer to move back home. It would be a fresh start away from all this drama, but it would also mean giving up the life and career I've built here. I'm not sure I'm ready to do that. I could really use some advice, Reddit. What would you do in my situation? Should I take the money and try to make things work with Tom and his family, or should I stick to my guns and move forward with the divorce and the new business? And what about my parents' offer to move back home? I feel like I'm at a crossroads, and every choice seems to have major consequences. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been a while since my last update. I wanted to let you all know how things turned out. First, I rejected Karen's offer. It was tempting, but I knew I couldn't live with myself if I took the money. I told Becca everything, and she was grateful for my honesty. It actually strengthened our partnership and made us more determined to succeed. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. It wasn't easy, and Tom's family tried every trick in the book to make things difficult. But thanks to the information Becca provided about Tom's previous marriage, my lawyer was able to negotiate a fair settlement. The prenup was invalidated due to Tom's failure to disclose his previous marriage, which meant I was entitled to a more equitable division of assets. As for the business with Becca, we're off to a good start. We launched our meal kit delivery service 2 months ago, and the response has been positive. We're not making millions yet, but we're growing steadily. Becca's culinary expertise combined with my marketing skills has proven to be a good match. We've even gotten some local press coverage, which has helped boost our profile. Tom's family wasn't happy about Becca leaving the family business. They've tried to pressure her into coming back, but she stood firm. I'm proud of her for standing up for herself. We've had to deal with some attempts at sabotage, negative online reviews we suspect were posted by family members, attempts to undermine our relationships with suppliers, but we're handling it. My career took a bit of a hit during all of this. I ended up leaving my job at the marketing firm. I'm not sure if it was because of Tom's threats or just the stress of everything affecting my work, but it became clear that it was time to move on. It was scary at first, but now I'm glad I did. Working on our startup full-time has been challenging but rewarding. Tom has tried to contact me a few times, usually when he's been drinking. He alternates between apologizing and blaming me for ruining his life. I've blocked his number and all his social media accounts. I'm done with that chapter of my life. I decided not to move back to my hometown. As tempting as it was to have my parents' support, I realized I didn't want to give up the life I've built here. My parents understood and have been supportive from afar. They even made a small investment in our business, which meant a lot to me. I won't pretend it's been easy. There are days when I miss the financial security of my old life, and I sometimes wonder if I made the right choice. Starting a business is stressful, and there have been times when I've wondered if we're going to make it. But then I remember how miserable I was with Tom and his family, how they made me feel, and I know I did the right thing. I'm focusing on building my new life now. The business keeps me busy, and I've started dating again, casually. I'm taking things slow and making sure to prioritize my own happiness and self-respect. I've also reconnected with some old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage, which has been great. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown through this experience. I've learned to stand up for myself, to trust my instincts, and to not let anyone make me feel less than I am. It's been a hard road, but I'm excited about what the future holds. I've also learned the importance of being true to yourself. I spent so much time trying to fit into Tom's world that I almost lost sight of who I was. Now, I'm embracing my background and the values my parents instilled in me. I'm not ashamed of where I come from anymore. It's part of what makes me who I am. Thank you all again for your support and advice throughout this journey. It really made a difference knowing I had people rooting for me, even if they were strangers on the internet. I hope my story can help others who might be in similar situations.